From Shadow to Light, Reclaiming Your Story, Part 4. Your story lives inside of you. Implementing a new narrative, empowering clients through story reconstruction. Think about a small problem you may be having. Imagine you are working with a client with this problem and how you might help them to externalize this problem and how they might externalize this problem without identifying with it. What might they name this problem? How might they see the role that this problem is playing in their lives? And how might they think about a time when this problem was not an issue? What was different during that time? What skills and abilities allowed them to function well without the problem's interference? A scaffold is a temporary structure that provides access to hard-to-reach areas. In narrative therapy, scaffolding is a therapist's support for clients in exploring and rebuilding empowering life stories. Scaffolds are widely used on construction sites to gain access to heights and areas that would be otherwise hard to reach. In narrative therapy, scaffolding is the support system created by the therapist to help clients explore and rebuild their life stories toward a more empowered narrative. Key aspects of scaffolding in narrative therapy include facilitating exploration, supporting reauthoring, creating a safe space, guiding the process, and empowering the client. To facilitate exploration, the therapist acts as the facilitator, guiding the client through the process of examining their experiences. This involves asking questions that encourage detailed storytelling and the exploration of alternative perspectives. Scaffolding involves helping the client to distance themselves from the problem-saturated stories that they have. This distancing allows for a clearer view of the problem and the client's relationship to the problem. In supporting reauthoring, a core goal of narrative therapy is to help clients reauthor their life stories. Scaffolding supports this process by providing the necessary tools and encouragement. This can involve helping clients identify unique outcomes, moments when the problem's influence was less dominant, and amplifying those moments to create alternative, more empowering narratives. In creating a safe space, scaffolding involves creating a non-judgmental and supportive environment where clients feel safe to explore their stories. Validation, active listening, and encouragement are essential components of this process. In order to guide the process, the therapist provides a framework for the therapeutic conversation, helping the client to navigate the process of externalizing problems, exploring their effects, and identifying their strengths and resources. The therapist assists the client in moving through the zone of proximal development. This is the area where the client can grow with assistance. By providing temporary support and guidance, the therapist helps the client develop the skills and confidence to create and maintain the preferred narratives. In essence, scaffolding in narrative therapy is about providing the necessary support to help clients move from feeling overwhelmed by their problems to feeling empowered to shape their own lives. So if possible, try this out with a friend. If not, imagine yourself as your own therapist, and perhaps you might wish to journal both the client response and the therapist response. So for now, think of a minor challenge, a recurring annoyance, or even a hypothetical scenario. It should be something that isn't deeply traumatic. Tell your story either to your journal or a friend or partner. If you're listening to someone else, listen actively. Pay close attention to what your partner or client is saying, and ask exploratory questions. For example, when did you first notice this happening? What strengths do you draw on when facing this challenge? If this issue were a character in a story, what kind of character would it be? Mapping the influence helps the client uncover the ways the problem shapes their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, revealing its pervasive impact. For example, you can ask, how has anxiety impacted your daily routine or relationships? How has depression limited your ability to accomplish your goals? Does this problem affect different areas of your life? Which areas? When? And you might ask whose voice they are hearing when they hear these stories or thoughts. And then look for unique outcomes. Ask about times when the problem was less present, or when you or the client you are working with handled it effectively. And externalize the problem. Talk about the problem as if it's separate from you or your client. This can help create distance and reduce self-blame. For example, it sounds like procrastination is really trying to take over your schedule. Or it seems like anxiety is showing up before your presentations. At the end of the time, briefly summarize and reflect what you've heard, and reflect back what you've noticed about your strengths or your client's strengths and resilience. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Why is it important to understand the meaning of words which describe emotions? According to emotions researcher Brené Brown, language is a portal to meaning-making, connection, healing, learning, and self-awareness. Having access to the right words changes everything. In her book, Atlas of the Heart, Brené Brown makes the argument that we are only able to truly experience emotions which we can understand and name accurately. People who can distinguish between a range of emotions are much better able to manage the ups and downs of daily life, according to Brené Brown. Learning about emotions helps us recognize and manage our own mental and emotional states. It equips us with tools to cope with stress, anxiety, and other emotional challenges, fostering resilience and promoting positive mental health. Precise wording fosters emotional understanding. According to Dr. Susan David, when we use accurate labels to describe how it is that we are feeling, we are able to transform what often feels like an oceanic, murky experience into something with boundaries and a name. Brené Brown has said that language doesn't just communicate to other people what we're feeling. It shapes the actual affect and emotion that we're feeling. When we use accurate emotional language, we can communicate our feelings effectively, resolve conflicts constructively, and develop empathy and compassion toward others. Emotions play a vital role in relationships. By understanding emotions, we can develop healthier and more meaningful connections with peers, family members, and friends. Not only does the process of accurately labeling our emotions help us to understand ourselves, it helps us build connections with others. Learning about emotions promotes self-awareness, emotional intelligence, healthy coping mechanisms, empathy, resilience, and overall mental health. It allows us to build emotionally balanced lives, meaningful relationships, and to better understand ourselves and others. So, are you ready to reauthor your story? Think about a story you've told yourself recently about who you are, what you're capable of, or how others see you. Notice what themes or patterns emerge. And then write a brief description of a story you feel defines you, either in your role at work or in your personal life. For example, I'm someone who always has to have the right answer, and if I don't, I've failed. And then explore the narrative's impact. Reflect on how this story affects your actions, emotions, and relationships. Does this narrative empower or constrain you? What assumptions underlie this story? Whose voice or influence do you hear in this narrative? Deconstructing the narrative involves externalizing the story. Name the story as if it were an external identity. For example, the perfectionist judge or the never enough tale. Ask yourself, how has this story shaped your identity or actions? What family, cultural, or societal norms have led you to the conclusions in your story? Whose voice is narrating this story? Is it yours, a parent, a supervisor, a teacher that you had back in 3rd grade? And then question the story's validity. What evidence supports or challenges this narrative? Are there moments in your life where this story didn't hold true? To craft a new story, Focus on empowerment and possibility. How has this story shaped your identity or actions, even outside of the narrative you are holding? Imagine how you might narrate this story in 10 years, when the arc of this story is complete and behind you. Feel free to have it end any way you desire. Use phrases like, "I am someone who," or "my story is one of." For example, I am someone who embraces learning and growth, knowing that uncertainty is part of the journey. Remembering is distinct from recalling. The goals of remembering are to build a supportive network to reinforce the preferred identity and create a sense of belonging and validation. Remembering is a core concept in narrative therapy, focusing on the deliberate act of reconstructing a person's identity by actively recalling and celebrating significant relationships and connections. It's about intentionally bringing valued people back into a person's life story, particularly when those relationships have been marginalized or forgotten due to the influence of a problem-saturated narrative. The process of remembering aims to counter the isolating effects of problems by highlighting the rich tapestry of relationships that have contributed to a person's life. It emphasizes that identity is not solely an individual construct, but is deeply interwoven with the social context of our lives. Key principles of remembering are valuing relationships. Remembering recognizes that we are shaped by the people we connect with. These can include not only the people that we've known in our lives, but authors, teachers, even public figures. In externalizing the problem, we want to separate the person from the problem again, creating space for remembering to take place. In identifying significant others, the therapist helps the clients identify those who have positively influenced their lives by supporting their values and aspirations, and then amplifying connection by exploring the qualities of these relationships, the values they represent, and the ways they have contributed to the person's sense of self. And creating a league of life, where the therapist helps the client to create a group of valued people that support their preferred story. Rituals and ceremonies that acknowledge and celebrate these relationships can be created by writing letters, creating collages, or holding symbolic gatherings. A client struggling with depression may feel isolated and alone. Through remembering, the therapist helps them recall past friendships, family members who offered support, or mentors who believed in them. This process can involve exploring old photographs, reading letters, or sharing stories about these relationships. When reflecting on influential figures, consider how the connection impacted them as well. This two-way view challenges the idea of identity as passive and highlights mutual contribution, restoring a sense of personal agency. You or a client may remember a relationship where someone gave you a great deal of themselves, but also ask yourself and your client what they got from the relationship as well. Remembering challenges internalize shame. A client who has experienced trauma may internalize shame and self-blame, where remembering can help them identify individuals who offered validation, compassion, and understanding during difficult times. For example, the therapist might ask, "Who was there for you when you felt most vulnerable?" Or who saw your strength even when you couldn't see it yourself? Remembering counters the effects of abuse. A person who has experienced abuse may have a difficult time finding positive relationships. Remembering helps the client to identify healthy relationships that existed before, during, and after the abusive relationships. Remembering is a powerful tool in narrative therapy that helps clients reclaim their identities and build more fulfilling lives by recognizing the strength and support found in those relationships. The final step in reauthoring the narrative is to anchor the new story. Identify actions or symbols that embody the new story. Ask what steps you can take to live out this narrative. Is there an image, quote, or object that reminds you of this story? One way to encourage yourself or your clients to live out this new version of their story is to create a visual representation of it by designing a vision board. For example, a client struggling with feelings of inadequacy might reauthor their story to focus on their resilience and problem-solving skills. To anchor this, they could create a resilience journal where they record instances of overcoming challenges and share these stories with supportive friends who can validate their strengths. Another example is a person who has suffered from the effects of trauma may, through narrative therapy, reauthor their story to one of being a survivor rather than a victim. Anchoring this new story could include creating a timeline of their life that shows the traumatic event, but also highlights the times of strength and resilience. Perhaps they have found a support group of other survivors that can witness and validate their new story. In essence, anchoring helps clients to live more fully in accordance with their preferred narrative rather than being dominated by problem-saturated narratives. So, anchoring involves witnessing, inviting others to hear and acknowledge their new story. This can include family, friends, a journal, or support groups. Documenting, creating tangible records of the new story, such as letters, certificates, or artwork, and reinforcing the story, finding ways to consistently reinforce the new story in their daily life. We tell stories because we're human. We think in stories because we're human. And now you realize that the stories running through our minds are simply that. Stories we are free to edit and reauthor. by reauthoring our own lives, our own stories, and those of our clients, we can establish a new understanding of who we are, expanding our range of possibilities, and opening doors we once thought were closed. By examining your story to date, keeping in mind timelines and influences, you are now free to create the story you wish to inhabit and live out. My sincere wish is that your story has a happy ending with lots of good times in between. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for all you do. And thank you for sharing your stories.